Who are we? We are the ones who step up for each other. I've got your back. You've got mine. Kindness, humility, empathy. It's not just talk. It's who we are. It's who we always have been. And no one can take that from us. The movement to bring it back, it started here. And here. And here. In school gymnasiums, community centers, the living room down the block. You'll be where? Okay, we'll be there. Who are we? We're the movement that will beat Donald Trump. Welcome. We're going to have to sweat for it. We're going to have to sacrifice and fight. We're going to have to lead. Everyone is going to have to lead with kindness, humility, empathy, and not just talk, but action. Action today, action tomorrow. Action until we win. And we will win if we do this together. It's who we are. It's who we always have been. Now let's show them.
Please welcome the co-founder and CEO of The Gathering Spot, Ryan Wilson.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the Biden campaign's Brunch with Andrew Yang. I'm Ryan Wilson, the CEO and co-founder of The Gathering Spot. TGS is a private membership club rooted in community and culture, headquartered in Atlanta, Georgia, where I am now. The Gathering Spot is not your traditional private club. Our youngest member is 21, our oldest member is 88. We're creatives, entrepreneurs, executives, a community of people that have come together in ways that I've been really proud of over the last 4 years. The economic impact that we've seen this community face over the last several weeks has been devastating. I'm sitting in the middle of our restaurant, and it's never an entrepreneur's dream to be in a place that has been empty for as long as this room has been. But I'm confident that we'll return. And so today's conversation is about that return. We're going to talk about the economic impact that COVID-19 has had on this community and talk about the ways that we can move forward. I'm lucky today to be joined by three amazing leaders in our community that are going to give us insights into this topic. And I think when it's all said and done, the optimism and the confidence that this too shall pass. Our plan here at The Gathering Spot has always been about trying to make sure that people were coming together at times when we most needed it. And this is one of those times. We're living in the middle of a historic event. But again, we're resilient. And so, again, today's conversation is about that. I'm really grateful and excited to welcome our first guest. He is a person that has endorsed Vice President Biden to be the next president of these United States. He's a former presidential candidate himself, a philanthropist, and the title that is most near and dear to my heart, a fellow entrepreneur. I'd like to welcome to Brunch, Mr. Andrew Yang. Mr. Yang, to get our conversation started, I want to ask this question. This crisis is having a disproportionate impact on communities of color, including many small business owners have seen the disparities in ways large and small. There's been systemic problems that have left the businesses undercapitalized, overly concentrated in the most affected areas, and getting less government aid. What specific plans can we create to make sure that these businesses survive the crisis?
Well, thank you, Ryan. Thank you for the great work you do. I love entrepreneurs, and it breaks my heart what's happening to entrepreneurs around the country right now. I know it breaks Joe's heart, too. I'm a numbers guy, and you can't look at these numbers and help but be shocked. Where we're at 38.5 million jobs lost nationwide, and that's an undercount because many of the people that are working in our communities aren't able to file for unemployment. And that burden falls most heavily on small businesses, communities of color. If you look at who has been able to access the payment protection program for small business, quote unquote, small businesses, 90% of minority-owned businesses have not been able to access those billions of dollars. So Joe has very concrete plans to help balance it out. Those are my boys. That's one of the fun things about the quarantine. So Joe has really firm commitments to try and double or even more, the level of resources that are going to minority-owned businesses. The Obama-Biden, very aptly named, the Obama-Biden small business tax credit, funding to CDFIs, which are community development financial institutions that are awesome at actually finding businesses that need money in communities that aren't getting served by like the Wells Fargos of the world. I'm probably now like in trouble for making fun of Wells Fargo, but whatever. So the plan is to get money into communities where we'll actually reach our families and particularly small business owners. We have to do a lot more for small businesses. And we have to face facts that many of the jobs that we've lost right now are not coming back. And that's like a very, very hard truth. But you're in Georgia, and Georgia has reopened. So theoretically, everything should be like right back to normal, right? Of course, that's not the way it works. Like, we're human beings. We're not light switches. It's not like when the government says reopen, we're all going to like rush back out to the nearest theater or restaurant or bar. So Joe and like, not to make it a binary choice, but you have to reflect, who do we believe is going to be looking out for small businesses and minority communities around the country? Is it Donald Trump or Joe Biden? Like, you know what I mean? That's literally what we're faced with. It's literally either going to be one of those two choices. And I've seen Joe's plans. They're exactly what we should be doing to try and get money into the hands of minority-owned businesses and small businesses around the country. I'm passionate about it. We've got to win for the sake of our communities. And it breaks my heart that the folks who are most able to access government aid are the best connected, the ones with the private bankers, the ones who can just like pick up that phone and say, hey, like, I hear there's some government money available. You think about that food truck operator, that nail salon, like, do they have a banker they can call? Probably not. And so that's why 90% of the minority-owned businesses have been left out in the cold. And that's what we need to change.
I'd love to introduce, and this is another leader that has done profound work, the floods in Michigan. I want to give a brief moment to just acknowledge some of the things that are going on in that state and the devastation, frankly, that many are facing. But we have the privilege of welcoming Lieutenant Governor of Michigan, Mr. Garland Gilchrist, to this conversation. And Mr. Gilchrist, are you with us?
I'm here. Hi, Ryan.
It's good to see you. Thanks so much for being here and participating in this conversation.
Thank you, Ryan. And I want to thank Andrew. I want to thank the Biden team for welcoming me to this conversation. This is critically important on so many levels as we face so many challenges as a nation and as a people. Certainly, the state of Michigan has been hard hit by COVID-19. We've been one of the hardest hit states actually in the country. Yes, we also had a once in 500 year flood happen here in mid-Michigan 3 days ago. We also have had wildfires, which are a rarity in the state of Michigan, actually pop up last night. So we, the people of Michigan, have had to demonstrate their resiliency in ways that perhaps we haven't had to, certainly in a lifetime's worth of years. But I think when we're talking about the question that you posed earlier, when it comes to this differentiated impact of this particular pandemic on entrepreneurs and business people of color and who are doing business in communities of color, we have to recognize, first of all, what our economy is truly about. And our economy really is about our people at the beginning and the end of the day. And the fact that people's confidence is really what drives this. And that's what drives the entrepreneurs to have the will and the determination to be confident that they can actually start a business. But we're going to need partners. Businesses need support. And that's not just support from one another. Need support from financial institutions that are willing to build relationship and not willing to only invest in relationships that they had before this pandemic. And that's what we saw from the Paycheck Protection Program. What we need to do is design economic policy that is truly responsive to the needs of community leaders and entrepreneurs, that recognizes that different people have different needs and different interests. Every entrepreneur of color does not have a lending relationship with a bank, but that's what that program is really based upon. But you might have a bank account or you might not. So we really need to think about instead being more responsive. And that starts with having business people of color at the table of decision making when we're deciding on economic policy. And if there's one thing I know about Vice President Biden, is that he knows how to bring people from diverse life experiences together to help decide and chart the best path forward. And that's why I'm so confident in his leadership, why I was proud to support him for president of the United States. We actually in Michigan had the privilege of having the last normal presidential campaign rally on March 9th of this spring, the day before actually we had our first confirmed coronavirus case here in the state of Michigan. So I'm proud to be here and participate. And this is an important conversation. And I've tried to take a leadership role in the state of Michigan to address this. And I'm looking forward to working with President Biden to do it for the long term.
President Biden, that's a nice ring to it, Garland.
Absolutely. So, if I can keep us moving here in the conversation, because I do have a question for you, Andrew, and I appreciate your leadership and your example as a person who's a fellow technologist. Y'all don't know I'm a software developer by training, and I appreciate Andrew's passion for technology and innovation. That's really where this next question comes from. As Lieutenant Governor and in the previous part of my career as a software entrepreneur myself, I spend a lot of time thinking about how technology and about how this innovative spirit can really help people in very practical and tangible ways. And I think in this pandemic response, we need to think about the opportunities presented by technology and just innovative thinking. So Andrew, I'm curious about your thoughts as to the ways that we can harness these two movements, these two big sets of ideas to solve the problems that people are facing right now. And the people who are working on the front lines of this pandemic, I'm talking about everybody from the bus driver, to the nurse assistant, to the utility worker, to the grocery store worker, but also to those entrepreneurs who are struggling right now to determine whether there's going to be demand for their business or service again, and how can they move forward. These stories are not often heard, but they are been laid bare now in a way that they've never been. And so I'm just curious, what do you think we can do, and how can we harness technology in this critical moment in our history?
Well, thank you for your leadership in Michigan and beyond, Garland. And I love talking to government leaders who are technologists. To me, we have to focus on the immediate concerns, which are delivering PPE into the hands of our frontline workers. And there have been a lot of inefficiencies there. It's really upsetting, where instead of having a national procurement strategy and like an organized supply chain, it's been this massive competitive debacle where, Michigan and Louisiana and New York State are all like trying to bid for gear for their people. And then the federal government is outbidding various states in various ways. So that's the stuff that it's super upsetting and would never happen if you had real leadership in the White House. In terms of data and technology, if you look at what other countries are doing, in South Korea, you get alerts anytime there's someone in your vicinity that has confirmed COVID-19, and even a description of that person. Now, that's going to seem a little too far out for a lot of us. But when you talk about what entrepreneurs need, they need confidence. And right now, it's impossible to have confidence if you don't have information. One of the things that we're struggling with is like a real deficit of trust, where I think many, many Americans would feel more inclined to give their data to Google or Facebook in terms of organizing who's where and like who might have COVID-19 than the government. And so we're late years behind a place like South Korea in terms of being able to provide citizens the assurance that we know what's going on where you are, and if you go to the market or to the mall or wherever, you're going to be fine. So that's the missing piece. And a lot of that data can come from testing. So it's all tied together. It's like in order for technology to really do its work, we need better information. And to get better information, we need better testing. And to get better testing, we need protected healthcare workers. We need PPE. So it's all like a chain. And unfortunately, this president has fallen short in delivering even the basics that would enable us to benefit from some of the technologies that we should be using.
Andrew, I appreciate that. And I want to acknowledge here for folks in this conversation, Andrew has been a leader in working to help deliver PPE to different parts of the country. And he actually conspired to help us get some PPE to some frontline workers here in the city of Detroit, where I'm speaking with you from right now. So I appreciate that. I just want to lift up one more point on data and information and why it's so critical. Not only can we not understand a problem if we don't have the data and information about it, but we also can't respond to something. And then the last piece is people can't trust what they can't see. And that's why we need transparency and accountability in government. So we've been trying to work on this certainly in the state of Michigan. And this is exactly the kind of leadership that we need from the federal government And the feds turn a blind eye at things they don't have data about. And that's why, again, the vice president's approach has always been looking at the facts on the ground, having the infrastructure to collect data and information so that we can thoughtfully, conscientiously, and quickly respond to the challenges that we're seeing in every part of the country. And that's exactly what leadership looks like. It doesn't look like, the president did yesterday when he was here in the state of Michigan, attempting to take credit for the innovation of Ford Motor Company when they switched over their production facilities to make ventilators. Instead, they stepped up, they stood tall, and they did what they needed to do. And that's the kind of leadership that we need.
I'd like to introduce one more voice into the conversation, and that's Marissa Shipley. She is a freelance coordinator in the film industry and also the vice president of her union. Welcome, Marissa.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for that wonderful introduction, and Mr. Yang and the Biden campaign for inviting me. I am a freelance art department coordinator. I work mostly in TV, so I've worked on shows like Vita, and I was on the show Grace and Frankie when all of this happened. So on a Thursday evening, we were told that was our last day of shooting for the foreseeable future, and I spent Friday alone in an office that was normally packed, silently crying at my desk with the sheer overwhelming emotion of not knowing what's happening and trying to finish as much work as I possibly could. But IALTI in general covers 150,000 workers in the US and Canada, 34,000 of whom are under the age of 35, 95% of whom are affected by COVID closures right now. So we were some of the first out of work, and we will be some of the last back at work because of the community nature of the work that we do. And all of that will be based on negotiating health and safety standards and changing the way we do our work really on a daily basis. My craft in particular is one of the lowest paid union positions in the industry. I make about half what the male-dominated positions in my department make. And that's the rate that I have negotiated myself up to. The normal rate is closer to a third of what everyone else in the department is making. Because of that, when crew takes off time between jobs, because we work 60-plus hour weeks, a lot of people take times between jobs to kind of recoup. I work job to job all year. And at this point, COVID has brought the entire industry to a total standstill. And it's been interesting to watch people turn to the arts as a comfort and escape in this time, while so many of us who are the fuel to getting those things made are struggling to make ends meet. I'm fortunate that I have savings and I have a family who supports me, but a November 2019 survey of Hollywood support staffers by the advocacy group Pay Up Hollywood found that 2/3 of respondents working as assistants in Hollywood were having to work a second job to make ends meet. And those jobs were delivery jobs and rideshare and food industry jobs that are also heavily affected right now. You see a lot of people advocating for higher wages, inclusivity, diversity in Hollywood. But as this goes on, people in historically underprivileged backgrounds can't wait this out. You have people opting out of the industry because they can't wait it out, because they don't have the resources to fall back on. And so once we're getting people into the room, we need to pay people equitably so that they can stay there. So Mr. Yang, question for you in the Biden campaign is, in many ways, women are bearing the brunt of this crisis. We're 80% of healthcare workers, almost 60% of low-wage workers, and already faced a gender parity, a gender pay gap across industries. How will we help working women moving out of this crisis?
I love what you do in terms of making art, creating movies and TV, and like, frankly, the things that, like you said, we're all turning to right now in this crisis. And people who do the work you do aren't driven by economics solely. Obviously, it's like you're driven by passion and love for it, because that's the only reason you would put up with all of the stuff that goes on in that industry. And one of the relationships I found over the last number of years that blew my mind, that I want to share with you, Marissa, and everyone watching, is that artists have the same impact on a community's economic development that entrepreneurs do. That if you have artists show up in a place you can actually fast forward and know that that community's economy is going to grow in the same way if I told you that number of entrepreneurs show up. And that blew my mind the first time I saw that relationship, actually like that's been studied. This is economics. But then it made sense to me because it turns out that artists and entrepreneurs are essentially cut from the same cloth. They have a vision, they see what could be possible. And people who work in creative endeavors are entrepreneurs through and through, where you look up and say, I have a vision for this show, this video, and then you make it happen, and then you just move right on to the next one. And you're completely right that people aren't going to be able to take those kinds of risks unless we do a lot to support individuals and families and the arts in every way we can. One of the things I learned when running for president that Joe had figured out before me is how pathologically anti-women and anti-family our economy and system are, where there are literally 2 countries in the world that don't have paid family leave for new moms. It's literally, I think it's like us and Papua New Guinea at this point. And when I saw that, I was like, well, that doesn't make any sense. So what Joe wants to do is Joe wants to balance out the economy in the workplace for families and women, making family leave mandatory and paid for by the government, having the government actually pay part of the company's bills to employ people during this time, because then if you're, let's say, a production company like yours and you're looking around saying, well, we don't have any work to do, the federal government should just be saying, like, don't worry about it. It'll come back eventually and we'll help pay those bills. And then people like you and the people in your industry can say, okay, like I just need to ride this out. So there are things we need to do right now, but bigger picture, our economy is fundamentally anti-woman, anti-family. You can see it not just in the pay gap, but also in the lack of support we provide to families up and down. And I know Joe's passionate about trying to make that better. He's been working on it for longer than just about anyone. That's not a dig at his age. He's been working on it for a long time. But big picture, art is an economic driver in the same way that business and entrepreneurship are, and we need to treat it as such. We need to free people like you up to be able to pursue the work that you love without fearing that you're not going to be able to put food on the table.
Marissa, may I respond to your question as well?
Absolutely.
Sure. First of all, I appreciate your leadership as an organized leader in your field. I want to thank you for that service. And I know that others in your industry thank you as well for that leadership. I think that this pandemic and the challenges that it has presented, and frankly, the ways that we have seen some policymakers step up to change policy and to expand the safety net and to make services available and to change eligibility standards and all those things, that's good that that's happened in the context of the emergency. I think it opens the door for us to have a much bigger imagination about the types of policies that are possible and the types of systems that we need to support people. We don't have to accept the systemic sexism that you have described and that Andrew's described in our economy. We don't have to accept the systemic racism that has been with us for generations. We have the chance to reconstruct, and I use the frame of reconstruction on purpose, a new system for how this economy functions and how it serves and supports people. And I think that that's a really important opportunity that we must take advantage of. If we step up to the moment, we can recognize that we have an opportunity to radically change the representation in our leadership, to radically change the people who make the decisions and make the choices about how these systems function, design, and how they work. When we had Reconstruction in the United States, we saw a radical change in the participation in terms of who were our leaders. And I think that's an opportunity for us to recognize that we only have this disproportionate impact on women because we need to empower more women to be in leadership. We need to create more space for that and to make sure that the systems for how we select leaders and decision makers do not have inherently sexist bias built into them. And so I think this is the opportunity that we have to take advantage of. And we're going to get better policy for it. We're going to get better programs for it. People are going to be better served by those institutions that are reconstructed with this in mind. And I believe Vice President Biden, when he talks about the fact that we need to be bold in our thinking going forward, that we need to have a Reconstruction mindset. And I believe this is something that's going to lead us to just policies and programs and practices that better serve all of our people, especially the women in our community who have been doing all of the work, like for all of the time. And we need to step up in a bigger way for that.
Yeah, I think it's one reason why Joe committed to a female running mate, which, was, I think, a very, very powerful commitment. We're all excited to see who he chooses.
Well, Mr. Lieutenant Governor and Marissa, I appreciate you participating in this conversation. Thank you so much for your insights, and we hope to see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And Mr. Yang, I'd like to...
It'll be back. We're just going to have to
Absolutely.
shine some UV lights on the production sets.
So, Mr. Yang, we're at brunch with you, and I'm in a restaurant, so I'd love to give you the closing remarks.
Thank you for this opportunity. I'm so passionate about entrepreneurship and the arts, and we have to face facts that this is a very, very deep, dark time. We're staring down the beginning of a new Great Depression by the numbers. Again, 38 million jobs that we know of that are lost. 42% of those jobs are gone for good. That's 16 million. I'm the math guy. I have the pin. So that's 16 million jobs gone. The Great Recession cost us 8.8. So you're looking at essentially twice the Great Recession in perpetuity moving forward, if we're lucky, and 58% of the 39 million jobs come back. So to Garland's point, and we all know who suffers the most when times are tough. It's people of color, women, people that are being marginalized before the fact. And then when times get rough, the majority of the aid and the funds and the loans head towards people who are the best connected, which doesn't correspond to women or minority-owned businesses. So the only silver lining here is what Garland suggested, is that we have to be able to think really big thoughts and make very, very big plans as to how we can reorganize our economy to be more just for everyone. That is the only thing that, to me, because one of the things that happens in our society is like things are bad and then we're like, well, it's okay because this good thing will come out of it. That good thing will not come out of this catastrophe unless we make it happen. And the only way we're going to make it happen is if Joe Biden defeats Donald Trump in the fall, and then we can get to the work rebuilding this country from the ground up so it works for everyone. I'm passionate about the fact we can do that. We can make huge changes, but it starts with winning in November. So let's come together for Joe, make sure that we're celebrating come January 2021, and then we can get to work. So thank you all so much for everything you do. We have to make your work easier. Like Marissa, Garland, Ryan, I mean, everything you guys are doing, like I appreciate it so much. And I know what you're up against. After Joe's president, we're going to have a lot more help for each of you. And let's get it done.
I think that's a great closing message. And I thank you for your participation today. Thank you for everyone that watched. Continue to stay engaged with this campaign, and let's keep our eyes on the prize to make sure that Vice President Biden becomes President Biden in a number of months. And so, again, thank you for everyone for participating. We'll see you soon.